Excellent. Actually, I could take the last question of Federica, which of course touches me, since I am very much into not even queer but post-queer strategies, which are actually deeply rooted, I think, in the work I am proposing in Metabody, in terms of, well, I'm asking myself, what is the perceptual infrastructure that has afforded the emergence of gender constructs?
Yes.
So, again, going back to this whole perceptual tradition of this perspectival vision, of this articulation of biologization of the body, and then also of its behaviors, of this quantification of its behaviors, of this classification of behaviors in bodies, and so on and so forth. And, well, I think what some of us are trying to do is precisely to undo not the content, but the actual perceptual infrastructure that is sustaining those kinds of categorization processes. So I think it's deeply rooted with many of the, or at least one, especially the microsexes sub-project, possibly others. The approach is certainly not clear in terms of working directly on performativity, but working on metaformativity, right? Well, metaformativity is precisely the reworking of the perceptual infrastructure that sustains particular conditions of possibility for categorizing bodies or measuring bodies in any respect. So that would be my take on the way I see actually the way queering gender is eventually happening in Metabody and could be taken further, of course. What would you think of this?
I think this is a very interesting take, Jaime, actually. I'm sorry if I've lost touch a bit with the newer development of Metabody. I am very aware I lost touch with the latest things you've done. And I think that definitely makes a lot of sense to me. If you are questioning the perceptual structure of the categorization of the body, then obviously you are also questioning gender categorization. And I agree with you that queerness will emerge as a co-functioning or an interaction between the metabody you are constructing and so the interaction between people performing and technology and this questioning of the perceptual environment around it. I think it's a very viable idea, definitely. Now, the question would be, how do you bring out more, how do you make that questioning more visible in terms of gender? But obviously, it might be a completely abstract or new gender or a range of genders that emerge from the metabody.
Maybe a meta-gender issue rather than a post-gender issue.
Yeah.
We could open the discussion here. Anyone wants to jump in? In terms of my take on the meta prefix is often in terms of not just transitions, not just in-betweenness of given actualities, but the emergence of what is not yet and which doesn't have to become actualized. So the ongoing emergence of the amorphous is how I like to call it. So it's like, just like I speak about microsexes as emergences that never become actualized in a form. So it's like I'm doing Aristotle more than Plato in this case. So processes that have no finality and have no origin. Again, how could we apply this to the gender issue? What kinds of potential genders that never become actualized could one think of? Or do we actually, or does this approach do away with the notion of gender considered as a class distinction? Gender, I feel, has a history in terms of class. It's a classification. So if we take it back to the, for example, the very androcentric society of the Greeks, where it's a clear class issue, it's a distinction of class and power relations, as it of course has continued to be in other much more recent contexts. then, I mean, even how does that relate to the proliferation of classifications that biometrics is bringing today? Biometrics is a proliferation, endless proliferation of classification now in terms of classes, class distinctions, and power relations.
Federica, thank you so much. It's this is sparkling that you have. It is the most brilliant I have ever seen in my whole life. So I'm not sure whether I understood it well, but so there is an ungendering, but the issue is that we are gendered. So I guess you are not just supporting the amnesia. Are you there?
Yes, I'm listening.
So when you are defining gender as an embodied memory, that it feels so powerful and so much, you are not just saying, well, let's forget this memory, right?
Are you there?
Yeah, I'm listening. But I'm not sure I've heard everything that Eva said, so if you could rephrase it a bit, I'm really sorry.
Yeah, I was, on the one hand, gender is a social construction, okay, and it is this combination of convergence, but when you define it as a embodied memory, you are not just proposing amnesia in relation to memory. Amnesia, forget about it.
This is a very interesting reflection, Eva. Thanks a lot for that. I'm not sure if I got the observation right, the question right. I think the idea of forgetting is very much to do with gender. There is a lot of problems with what we remember and what we forget in queer and post-queer theory. And you know, the issue of what we risk forgetting as opposed to the issue of what we actually want to forget, especially when you think about feminine gender embodiment and the idea of femme, which I think I personally embody, and maybe you do too, this idea of, you know, how we do femininity and how we do femininity without forgetting that the history of femininity is also the history of oppression of women by men, but at the same time how we are entitled to still do femininity, and even to queer femininity as an instrument of empowerment, you know? So what do we forget? What do we not forget? This is the theory of unforgetting, for example, as in, you know, remembering without being disempowered by what we actually remember. So it's a brilliant point you made.
Yeah, I thought that I was thinking about memory also when we were talking the other day with Ninish about the architecture, because I think even if you enter in the Metatopia, the name of the architecture, you enter there and then you start becoming something, or in part becoming, but there are some memories, you know, that what you, your experiences of, I don't know, that you may not want to forget, or you may put into play, but this sort of heritage, or when we were discussing this morning about the, so we have to hack the movement, creating new movements, and if Kevin says, okay, all your movements are being tracked, and then how can we have them and tracking them? And there are some, if it is true, that I'm not sure if my movements can be individually tracked with data that I don't know what it is exactly. There would be some that I wouldn't want to take out because they are my metabolism of my grandma, for instance. No, so.
I think the important issue when I person to think about indeterminacy in relation to metabody, how can metatopia become a space of opening up towards indeterminacy? Let's think of this in terms of gender, for example. Now, there's of course the tendency of trying to think, oh, with absolute indeterminacy, absolute chaos. I'm never talking about that, and that is the very important issue. So that's why some of us in the project work on the idea of disalignment, which I like to link to this concept of Epicurus of decline and the micro-deviations that account for emergence of novelty in the world. So I like it as a metaphor, as an idea. So for me, indeterminacy is never like an absolute utopia that we are going to forget everything we have and be free-floating amorphous entities such as Lovecraft's primordial gods. But rather, it's about thinking from our rather super-aligned lives in which we find ourselves in particular contexts where we seem to be enacting rather predictable choreographies of gender, of sex, of power, of whatever, of all kinds. How can we induce subtle disalignments from these that generate a little bit more? That's all I'm asking, a little bit more open-endedness, a little bit more indeterminacy. So we could think of gender in those terms, and then this is where I think it exceeds performativity in terms of we are operating a movement in all its microscopic infinitesimal variations, not just at the level of discourse and language, which is one particular aspect of movement. So I consider language itself as one particular kind of movement that enacts gender and other such categories. But gender is also enacted through other much more minute, diverse and emergent kinds of movements. So how can we focus on the open-endedness of bodies and how bodies may already always be having let's say, micro-genders emerging in very small gestures that we perform and which are never fully aligned with any particular dominant kinds of choreographies of gender, which anyway, who can tell which is the perfect choreography of gender? That's always very ambiguous per se, but in any case, I invite you to explore what in your movements, in your micro-movements, is escaping already some standardized choreographies of gender. How can that become a richness? Like this meta-gender would be this open-ended richness of potentials. And then bringing it back to big data, for example, to the kinds of global choreographies that are disseminated through selfies nowadays. How is it that social media, from mass media, television and so on, to social networks, how far are they inducing novel degrees of homogenization of gender choreographies? How far sometimes they might also allow the emergence of new gender choreographies, but then is it not that they become new niches, market niches, new kinds of standardized niches? This is an open question. I leave it a bit in the air. I mean, how far social networks, for instance, which are sold or which are presented as spaces of utter freedom and so on, I think they are also sometimes helping the capturing of emergent, let's imagine emergent genders or open-ended genders. How far are they easily captured in these cybernetic networks of control, which help capitalize novelty? So these are open questions, but that's how I think of this.
Yeah, I agree. But I think there is an issue. I think Federica was also talking about this, about you have to make, in a way, understandable to somebody who is not aware of that, the issue. So it can be, it's like, will someone, he reacts, say, let's forget about Foucault because it is driving to nothing, and then it is an issue that perhaps can be explained or in a very simple way, you know, in a way that can be rich and not misunderstood, because it is, in the end, the hack could be an issue of nuances. And that is an issue. Is that I don't want to be up there alone. If you want to join. If not, I go to the authority, I go down.
No, we can people up there eventually. Okay. So I don't want to say something. She wants to say something. Somebody else will say something.
Well, I just wanted to say that in all this conversation about gender, I think we always have to think about not only the result and how to hack gender stereotypes and all, but we cannot forget about current cultural and political conditions, because we don't depart from this same position. I mean, I'm sorry, but as a woman, for me, gender is not the same as for the other guys in the room, because we are not treated in the same way, precisely, of our genders. So I think when we think about this, especially when we are discussing it in theoretical ways, we cannot forget that actually we are perceived as women and as men, and we are treated in different ways because we're women and men. So when we think about the hacking, yeah, we have to take into account, I think, all these conditions more down to earth. Like, just...
No, but I think I fully agree, and that's precisely what I mean with misaligning from our conditions. We have to analyze more in depth our conditions to find there the possibilities.
Do you want us up here, or is this okay to sit?
Yeah,
just video now.
Who?
So Federica can see.
Okay. I'm not sure she wants to see me, but I'm actually changing back to a different topic, because after listening to, I've been thinking after listening to a bunch of talks, in particular Yvonne's, Stefan's, yours, and now Federica's, and having talked about data myself, I think in terms of Metabody, hacking Big Data Brother, we might be focusing on the wrong target. In looking meta, in one sense, not your sense, means to look at what's behind the behind. So in other words, what's behind the behind the behind the behind in regressive. I think if we talk about who owns big data, we keep on talking about the fact that corporations and the government own it. But based on everything I've seen at cybersecurity conferences and my discussion with computer scientists involved in cybersecurity, their consensus is that increasingly hackers own big data, that big data is deconstructing itself, it's falling apart, because as governments and corporations construct these mounds of data, hackers come in with much better technology and take away that data and make it non-private and more public. So as your and my data become tracked and is built by governmental and corporate entities, it is then deconstructed and stolen by hackers. So what we might be thinking of doing, actually, in a meta sense, is hacking the hackers. That would be the real source of getting big data. So that was just my reflection after listening to a lot of these talks.
That's a very provocative issue, yeah.
I don't know how we hack hackers without getting hacked back. Somebody like Marcello here, for instance, to get hacker data off the dark web, you could make an installation, go into the dark web, take a risk, get information from hackers, maybe a bunch of credit card numbers, then put it into an installation, and then risk having hackers find out you did that and attack your installation through the internet.
Yvonne wants to ask something.
There's a similar expression in Russian. Hi, Federica. I have a question which is not really similar to what we discussed now. It goes back to what you asked me, and it links your talk with Emma's talk. I wanted to ask about digital humanities. You were saying that humanities are altered via access to this massive data, and I'm interested in what you both think how this way into the internet alters one's the contents of what we think about, our questions, the way we build theory, and the way these new theories, which are built with different methods, different instruments than before when we went to the library, reflect a different image of the human. Because you were talking about how theories are constructed and how they alter our human self-understanding. So this would be my question: how theory is altered in terms of big data.
A new big data theory, in terms of not theory of how we big data, but a new way of thinking theory.
Yes, yes.
I have no idea about big data. No idea. I just went to this, and I think we have to think about that, because when we started to Beatriz and I to work on this workshop that we have thought to have with Jaime and with Federica before to discuss about these issues. We had no idea and went to the web to see what was big data and reached the conclusion nobody knows what it is. So we are not interested in, as you said, and I think Federica also put there, we will have to, in order to have a theoretical approach, to do, I completely agree with and Beatriz too, what do these big data do to us? Do we believe in data? It is like ghost. I don't know. I mean, to me, data is ghost. As long as the question was, I don't know how much represents you or is performing you if you let it be you, yourself, and your personality. And I don't know what is the limit. This is what, not because I don't believe it, Kevin, that if that this data is tracking you. I know they track you. I don't know how much is you. I think there must be a frontier in which you don't want to lose your memory, and then there is the issue, because you have an identity that you build yourself, and it's partially what they track. But I think it is very difficult. I think we should work in this line. What do big data do to you? If you have this, we talked, Jaime and I, a long time ago, about a person he met in a plane that had this thing in his hand.
Biometric.
The biometric, yeah. And so there are people who feel safer and well when they are just putting their, what they believe they're part of themselves on the net, you know? So I think we have to approach this in this way.
What you were saying about sharing, what you were saying about sharing, what she's...
Yeah, you're right. My idea goes a little bit in another direction, because I was talking about theory. So if we in the humanities don't follow the lines of the writings of the thinkers anymore, but we just go on the internet, we Google, then we have a knowledge accumulated there, the biggest library everyone can imagine. So, but the thing is, we have, like, time becomes thick if we Google, but at the same time we get information which is not really qualified by where it comes from, what kind of science is standing behind there, what source is it, who was the thinker, and we will make theories which are in this way new that we neglect the constituents of that knowledge we found.
Yeah.
So I think this is a problem, how to work out theories that don't really deal anymore with where the knowledge comes from.
Yeah, I know.
I think there are some quite some debates on these issues, like, well, for instance, Kate Hales has written quite a bit on especially in the last book, how we think on the issue of hyperattention, the new kinds of attention that appear with these kinds of technologies, but also other people like Nicholas Carr are thinking about, how is it that memory is disappearing because of the speed of the technology. So it's a vanishing memory, it's a vanishing knowledge. And many people, we get sometimes in the newspaper pages with the idea that from this era there will be nothing left, because the material memory is a disappearing one. Because if we follow the analysis of Harold Innis, who was the precursor of McLuhan, Marshall McLuhan, who was doing this very interesting analysis of the balance between cultures which are focusing on time and cultures focusing on space, which are the imperial cultures, which is where from the Roman Empire onwards, the whole thing became imbalanced, focusing just on spatialization, forgetting the temporal aspect, which still in Greece might have been a bit more balanced. And he was criticizing intensively the United States imperialism in terms of the exponential erasure of time in favor of the spatialization of writing and of memory and of everything. And so now we are even taking this in a much larger term, which implies, what kind of vanishing theory and a vanishing thinking and a vanishing memory does that eventually promote? That's one. So what I like to always invite in meta-way in all kinds of situations, even in movement exercises, is first of all the gesture of deceleration. How about decelerating knowledge processes, writing processes, going back to a slow entanglement with your knowledge and with your expanded body of knowledge, rather than this super acceleration. What would happen then if we try to do that in this accelerated environment, for example?
I wonder one thing about the data. One thing is that how to believe that the moment about that, all these perspectives and views and discussions cannot block the experience or okay. I wonder about how did all this accumulation of data and things cannot block my experience and go further in this kind of is not only substitution in diverse thinking. It's like a kind of cannot be substitutes or erased. Like, but it's not always accumulation. What are you going to do with that? Even for not blocking. For disblocking some kind of processes.
And a comment for Kevin and Eva. Because I'll be waiting otherwise. Thank you.
So, quick comment for start from you, Kevin. Well, first, I think we should define hackers, because for me, hackers are positive value. So, someone was yeah, maybe that's. But I mean, you can have hackers who are hacking something to find new uses of technologies. Or exactly just to exploit data, selling data, so more malicious use. So that's the first issue. So the first comment I want is for you. The second thing is, I agree with what you said, that's really true. We always think about big companies, but we don't think about hackers or whoever is able to crack into this network and steal data. But also in that case, we also have to distinguish. I mean, there is someone who is using the data like WikiLeaks, one of the biggest example in this case, and then it's kind of freeing this data, and it's not really personal data of citizens, but it's more about as a big political issue. So in that case, it's a very good value. But in other case, might be even sensible data and also something private, and in that case, it's also doesn't have a positive. So it's a bit more complex. That's what I meant with this, so that it's not so just. And last thing, I think it's also nowadays getting also harder and harder to hack into these big networks. I mean, the internet still has a lot of holes. That's clear. That's but I mean, it's not straightforward. It's not like tomorrow I want to crack into Google's network and I will do it. So it takes some knowledge, takes some time, and maybe you don't succeed, or maybe you end up in prison. So
that's very likely. According to, I've been to these cybersecurity conferences. I thought the same thing until I went to security conferences. Our school was one with FBI, NSA, CIA, all these people there, and big corporations like Computer Associates that make antivirus programs and so forth. And they all say the head of Chief Information Officer of Computer Associates said on stage 2 years ago that he does not use banking online anymore because he says the black hats are winning. He says there is no data security. And every single person I heard this past year from the CIA, the FBI, and the NSA said the same thing. And if you look at the news in the United States, it went from about every couple of years a big company being hacked to every week now something comes out where some corporation is getting hacked and millions of people's data is getting stolen. Yesterday, New York Times, 2.4 million people got their data stolen from the UCLA Medical Center, which has been under hack for the past month that they just found. And this is the thing, experts say we're reactive and they can't keep up. They have to wait for the next exploit before they can figure out how to plug it. And so anyway, based on what the experts say, it looks like big companies, the government, and us, we're all losing the battle for privacy. In the future, I predict, based on what I've heard them say, we're not going to have any privacy whatsoever. It's all going to be deconstructed. But that's just, what I hear.
No. That's true. I agree with that. That's also true. No, I just want to balance. And exactly, quick comment for you. I think also agree with what you said. Just I think on the other side we have some. Everyone of us has some connection to big data somehow, even just using email, and it's part of our identity, even if it's not a biometrical device. But okay, I just want to add that on.
I totally agree. The issue is nowadays what this do to us and how we deal with this, because it is there. We are being part of this. So I'm sorry, Mom, because I didn't get it. Because probably I think probably for many people in humanities they are not aware, but for people doing cultural studies, I think they are a bit more aware, or at least trying to get to know where the information comes from, or what, I don't know where information, what you are getting come from. But probably it would be very useful to sort of create a technique, or to think about a technique about this or some questions. So yeah, I think it is essential.
The last two interventions, I think, because of time. Can I just say, I just wanted to say a couple of things. One is about what Kevin said. I think this idea from an insider that big data deconstruct themselves is fascinating. I do think that technology always does. At some point, software and data for example, always undo themselves. There will always be a moment where they are sort of disappointing us or surprising us or functioning in unexpected ways, or be opaque or illegible. And that's when a technology starts being interesting. So I think that that's a fascinating point you made. Perhaps, I don't know, maybe in Metabolic we should also think about this power of technology to sort of surprise and go beyond what we can foresee, and how this makes us co-evolve somehow with technology. And then I wanted to say something about also the other questions that Yvonne and the point that Yvonne and Eva made, but I don't think that there is enough time, but I do think, you know, all these ideas about decelerating theory and all these ideas about how, you know, hyperattention, distant reading, the idea of distant reading coming from Moretti, the idea of doing cultural analytics and letting the data mining run, will give us new understandings of culture, will give us new understanding of the humanities. This debate that, yes, hate is part of, you know, is everything new in the digital humanities? Or are the digital humanities just something old? Because the humanities have always been involved with technology, you know, writing with technology, language with technology. All this is very interesting for Metabody as well, and to think about. But I don't know. I don't know how. I'm not sure how to make this work in the context of Metabody, because. In a way, you know, this is a problem of space and time, yes, in the sense that, for example, yes, it is true that there is this whole theory of acceleration today and how everything is becoming more and more accelerated. But then there are also other theories, like Wendy Chan's theory on software, and she says the opposite. She says everything has become much more casualized. This is how, for example, source code happens. So let's think less about space and more about time. So how do we make sense of this dialectic between accelerationism and decelerationism, about remembering, but also about sort of snapshotting our theories and making them run faster or disappear in a way. And how do we make sense of the idea of not forgetting certain things, but at the same time generating illegible states, illegible genders, for example. You know, the idea of illegible gender, going back to gender, is fantastic, because we know from queer theory that society wants gender to be legible. And if you are not legible as a gender person, you are in trouble. But at the same time, if we make gender illegible, how do we not go back to the universal male white subject? You know, so these are all questions from Metabody in a way. I don't know if I'm making sense here. I'm trying to think fast. You will think very fast and I don't.
I think that's precisely what we were mentioning before in terms of illegibility not being a pure neutrality, but we are starting from precise context and trying to analyze or to see or to facilitate very subtle opening up from those contexts. You know, it's not about this pure neutrality, which is this permanent fear, which I know has been in feminism for decades. Like, you know, the neutrality takes us back to the patriarchal model of the neutral abstract subject. That's precisely what I think illegible affects in Metabody would not propose, in terms of working through differentials in a completely different manner. So I agree with your point. I think we have to not fall into that trap.
Yeah.
But then, you know, I think there are many options at hand. I don't believe in the trap of self-referential discourse from which you can never exit, or, you know, or a technological determinism from which you can never exit because they will always track you later on. I think, well, you know, one can always believe in those determinisms if one wants to not look for alternatives. I think alternatives things are just emerging all the time. They're just there. But we need to play or dance along with them. That's the difficulty. We have lost the capacity to dance.